Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Needs Some Introduction. In today's episode, we'll be breaking down the seventh episode of Your Friends and Neighbors, an episode called The First Honest Thing.
Wow, I don't remember that line in the dialogue, and it's always a line from the dialogue.
It's at the very end when he is able to sleep.
Oh, okay.
The first honest thing he'd done in a long time, getting arrested.
For something he didn't do.
Ironically. I'm your host, Victor, and on this podcast, I try to introduce you all to something new to watch, usually a show we're watching week to week. As is usually the case, I am joined here by my co-host, Sona.
Hi.
We're here to discuss Your Friends and Neighbors. Anecdotally, seems to be a very popular show for Apple TV, and it's been very popular for us, by the way, Sona. One of our it may end up being our most popular show coverage ever, believe it or not. Even more popular.
I love that.
Isn't that crazy? I wouldn't have suspected it. I'm so happy when this happens, by the way. I try so hard. I try so hard to find, this is the biggest work that I do on the show, by the way, is trying to find a show that I think will lend itself to conversation, something we could go week to week on. Sometimes there are interesting shows that are binges, like The Bear. We'll definitely be talking about The Bear, but a binge. I wish that was a week-to-week show. There is definitely food for thought there, but it's not always that easy to find that. So it is so satisfying to me when I find a show that actually gets popular, that actually draws people to the podcast, that actually lends itself to conversation. Even if we're critical of the show, it has some degree of conversation. And by the way, this is the last caveat here, is that it's not getting tons and tons of coverage.
I was about to say that the perfect balance is something that is not flooding popular culture such that it's almost like spoiled for choice of different places to hear people talk about it.
And like a little peek behind the curtains. But for example, on the podcast, we blew up years ago when the first season of Severance came along. And believe it or not, this season of Severance, which is the show is so much more popular now, and our podcast more popular as well.
So much more.
The ratings overall were bigger than they were for us. This is personally with the first season of the show, but not significantly larger because, of course, the first time around, everyone was blindsided by the phenomena of that show. And now there are 85 podcasts about Severance. So we're just one of 85. So even the fact that we're able to, tread water at that point was probably a good sign. Same thing happened with White Lotus, very popular for us. But of course, when we covered the previous season, the show was just starting to catch fire. And of course, now there is an official HBO podcast. Mike White is going on every single culture podcast out there. So it's very hard to compete with that when we're just little old you and me, Sona.
Just two people chatting.
Just two people talking about something. So uncommon with these podcasts. Paradise, by the way, another example of that earlier this year. Again, a show that I was just like, well, maybe that'll work. And it was very popular for us and is getting a second season currently in production. We'll probably have one within less than a year, maybe as early as the end of this year. And very popular, partially because it really became a phenomenon, one of the most popular shows of the year. And once again, blindsided the popular culture was not something that was on a lot of people's radar. And here we have it again, a show that is already also getting a second season currently in production. So hopefully we'll get this within a year as well. I think that these streamers are really trying to do this. Poker Face is just back. Very entertaining so far, by the way. I think there are 4 episodes.
A lot of great guest stars this year.
So many guest stars. It's crazy. This week's episode is very funny. They wrap up, minor spoilers for Poker Face, they wrap up the whole she's running away from the mob with episode 3 of this second season. So now she's really just out in the wind, solving crimes and like discovering that that's like her calling in life. So it really has just kind of hit its groove. These shows are very light and breezy and fun, and she's fully inhabiting these roles. But that show also is a show that it has taken years to come back. And these streamers really are trying to get into a cadence when they could put these shows at a somewhat regular pace, because taking 2 or 3 years off between shows is no way to keep the audiences coming back for more. And these streamers need hits to keep the ratings coming. Anyway, all is to say that we'll be looking for other things to watch here. Speaking of things we might be covering in the future, Nine Perfect Strangers, by the way, Sona, coming back next week. Very curious to see if this is something we're going to talk about. we have the luxury in this particular case. We're going to be talking about Your Friends and Neighbors for 2 more episodes. Sona, we're just 2 weeks away from the finale.
Hard to believe.
But of course, that allows us to sample Nine Perfect Strangers for a couple of weeks to see if it is something we want to cover on the show or not. But I did send you a trailer for an HBO show that's coming. It's been pushed. It was supposed to originally come out around now on Memorial Day, which is around the time that Brad Englesby, the creator of the show, put out Mayor of Easttown, which was a very important show for us here on the podcast, basically launched this podcast. His follow-up series here on HBO is called Task. Did you get a chance to see this trailer?
I did for once watch the trailer that you sent me in a timely fashion.
What'd you think?
It seems intriguing. I'm into it. It seems a little bit creepy, seems a little bit suspenseful.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a murder investigation, I think loosely based on true facts. This unsuspecting father, he is being pursued by this task force. Apparently, he's tied into these home invasions. The home invasions themselves very creepily conveyed in the trailer. So interesting with these Halloween masks. Reminds me of, did you see this most recent season of Fargo, the one with John Hamm in it?
I've never watched Fargo.
Oh, you haven't? Okay.
It seems like something I would enjoy,
You
but
would,
I
yeah.
don't ever find the time. My reality TV, I guess, is taking up too much of my
It's
spare
monopolizing
time.
your time.
Yes, instead of watching more quality programming.
Yeah, you definitely would like it. And it's an anthology, so you can watch it any one of the seasons in any order, and there's really no connection between the two of them, the multiple seasons. This current season, they had a home invasion where with masked suspects. It were very reminiscent of this particular trailer for Task. And one more thing I wanted to mention, actually a couple more things. Just starting to cover, probably next week, we will begin covering Murderbot here on the show, another Apple TV series. Alexander Skarsgård plays a robot, very much like a robot, a RoboCop type, who starts to question his own sentience. I don't know if you would enjoy this, Sona, because
I don't know if I would either from that description, even though I'm a big fan of Alexander Skarsgård.
But that's why I was going to recommend it to you. This is very funny. So he has reprogrammed himself to be autonomous, but he's not allowed to convey to the humans around him that he is now autonomous. So he doesn't want to give himself away, and he just likes to watch soap operas. That's all he really wants to do. But they keep dragging him into these missions. The reason to watch this is because he is so funny in this role, and he is constantly monologuing against these people that he cannot stand being around. And it's very funny. It's like someone who just has like some kind of personality disorder trying to fit in with their coworkers is basically the narrative going on inside his head. But he's murderous oftentimes, and he's trying to be as good as he can because he really doesn't want to kill anybody, but he does think about it often. and it reminds me of Dexter to some extent, like someone pretending to be and having this very ironic internal monologue. So you might actually like this. I got it. And by the way, 20-minute episode, Sona. 20 minutes.
I love that. He's a super charismatic actor for sure.
This is the reason to watch the show. He is so funny in this role. So anyway, if you're not averse completely to science fiction, do check it out. It's a lot of fun. And we'll be covering it here on the show, along with other things. Like I said, these are 20-minute episodes. So the plot coverage will be very quick. Most of it is just like really funny lines. And of course, the stress of people start to wonder something's going on with this robot. And like he's constantly paranoid that they're discovering him. It's like a stressed out workplace comedy and science fiction mystery. There's definitely a conspiracy that's being unraveled here. But primarily, like I said, it's the star power of Alexander Skarsgård trying to deal with these annoying human beings and commenting on it constantly. Oh, and Sona, one more thing. Final Destination. I got to see a preview of this new Final Destination from the folks who rebooted the Scream franchise. This is like a blast, like so much fun. If you like if you like this franchise, it is like the best of the franchise. It is the funniest of the franchise. It has the most elaborate, crazy kills. I was just curious, do you have any relationship with this franchise? It's been around for a long time.
No, I haven't seen any of them.
Really?
Because
Wow, okay.
it always struck me, I love suspense. but I don't really like horror. And this always struck me as more on the horror side of things.
It's a very weird recipe, and it's become this over time that it always was somewhat comedic, but now it's become primarily comedic. That there are these elaborate kills, like you do see in slasher movies. The series has become so self-aware that while you're watching the film, you're like, "Oh, that's how they're gonna die." No, 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 that's how they're gonna die. And it's as if like death has a sense of humor because it like goes in one direction and then in the other. And some of these kills are so ridiculously elaborate. If death personified has a real sense of humor, and that's some of the comedy here. And of course, the people are, you see them walking right into the jaws of death. And that's some of the irony of there too, kind of like a slasher film where you're like, what an idiot. They're going to put themselves right in harm's way. And actually that isn't how they end up dying. It's some other subtle thing that happens. So it's constantly playing with your expectations. It's a very strange and unique franchise. But this thing it was more of a cult franchise over time. It seems to have built up a following. But all this is to say that this weekend, the box office projections are coming in, and internationally, not only in the United States, this is going to be massive. So we're going to see a lot more of these movies because this kind of niche franchise may go fully mainstream with this.
Interesting.
It's such a weird franchise, though. It really is basically a slasher franchise, but with no slasher, without a killer. Clumsiness is the big killer here, the silent killer. And of course, tonight we will be hoping that the Knicks can clinch this series.
Fingers crossed.
I know it's going to go to 7. I think it's going to go to 7.
Oh boy.
I know. I didn't like that. I don't like how they looked in the last one. Those threes are coming down, raining down. It all depends on whether those threes come down for the Celtics or not. But fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
They looked good in the first half, but
Jalen Brunson can't do everything all the time.
Can't do everything by himself. It's true. It's true. Okay, so let's get into this episode of Your Friends and Neighbors. So Barney's not dead. As I suspected. He doesn't even seem to be that injured, actually.
I mean, for a guy that was on the hood of a car a second ago, yeah, he seems surprisingly good shape.
Fine. Bring me some pudding. I'm ready to go home.
Yeah.
What did you think of the episode in general?
I liked it. I am concerned, having only 2 episodes left, what's going to happen in those 2 episodes and how satisfying it will be for closing out the season.
Yeah.
But on its own, I enjoyed this episode.
Yeah, I liked it in the fact that it feels like they were the things that I was kind of bumping up against last week, where you have this family drama and this police investigation, and they're completely on parallel tracks. And I'm like, how do these things don't even seem to intersect? They're able to tie it all together here. By the way, this is the last episode that critics got to see early on. So all those critical reactions were based on these first 7 episodes. So I guess the critics themselves do not know how the season wraps up, which is, I guess, a good thing. I'm also curious to know, where are they going to, I'm very curious as to where they're going to leave things, because just like you said, there seems a lot of unanswered questions. There's a lot of characters on the periphery that haven't fully revealed their plot value, or their overall, the shape of how they tie into the show. And there's a lot of them, right? We have this art dealer out there. We have Lou, and
I haven't seen Lou in a bit.
I know, right? She's been in all the episodes, but not this one, but
she was for just a 3
minutes
in the
yeah, for like
sequence.
A minute here and there, exactly.
Yeah, and bringing these police officers into the forefront in a way that I wasn't necessarily expecting, and I'm not sure I like it, but let's see. I feel like I'm supposed to like this detective character, the woman, more than I do.
Lynn, Detective Lynn. So that's where we can start things off. She shows up at the hospital, checking in on Barney, and of course, very suspicious. I do like her, by the way. I do like the fact that she is coming to Coop and saying, look, I don't believe in all these coincidences. This is a quiet town, and all of a sudden there's just weird stuff happening every day between these burglaries, and now you getting beat up in the street, and someone is murdered in their house all at the same time. And somehow Coop's always tied into all of these, right? Some of it she doesn't even realize how tightly coupled they are.
I think the content of it is good. It's just, I don't know if it's the actress or the character, but this tough as nails portrayal, it's just not landing for me for some reason.
Yeah. Seems a little contrived. But yeah, but now we found out, right, that she came from where she worked in Brooklyn, and now she's been
I
working
think
in
the
this.
Bronx, I
The
think they
Bronx is.
said,
Oh,
because I was wondering if then they would tie her into Lou somehow,
oh
because
yeah,
I think
good
Lou's
point.
in the Bronx.
Yeah, good point. And then now I got this. Now in this sleepy Westmont village, which of course is not so sleepy anymore recently, anyway. But she does, Coop once again, just super cool. Does not bother him that he's being investigated for this, or not on the surface anyway, but underneath he is indeed feeling the pressure. And she does say, like, I don't know exactly what's going on here, but I can just tell that you are in trouble, and it's time for you to say something. And he does seem to contemplate just for a moment, but then he says, "Nope, everything's just fine." And she's like, "Okay, well, that's the last olive branch I'll extend to you." He does also, and I like to see this, by the way, that he has this guilt about what happened to Barney. He talks to Mel about it. Mel is concerned. Something is going on. She's not exactly sure what it is. But I do like the idea that everybody, right? Sam seems concerned something's going on. Mel seems concerned. And then, of course, this is all kind of just in their interactions with him. But then when he goes and talks to Barney, Barney's like, come on, give me a break. Who are those guys? Why are you handing me bags of cash? So Barney knows full well. And he's a little angry about it as well.
Mm-hmm. As he should be,
Absolutely.
especially when they seem to be really close friends as well.
All right. Speaking of the cops coming into the forefront, what do you think? I have my theory here, and I'm not sure exactly how this character ties into everything else, but it's definitely one of the mysteries here in the show. Lynn's partner, Hernandez, right? So we
Mm-hmm.
spend a lot of time. He's like flirting with the other girl, and then supposedly he's going on a date. He's wearing different cologne. There's something
Mm-hmm.
she can't place it. I've smelled that before, but I can't place it. What's that smell? And I think that's a clue, by the way.
Mm-hmm. There was a lot of time spent on the cologne.
Yep. And so there's some clue about that. But most importantly, is that also that he makes all the discoveries this week, right? Oh, by the way,
Yes. Yes.
I found, first of all, he's rummaging through Coop's garbage, finds uh, one of those Princeton flyers, which has a little bit of blood on it, uses that to match it to the blood that's in the bleach sample that they had as well. I guess that's possible. I mean, the bleach isn't going to kill all the DNA. So, I mean, you might get a partial match at least. So he's also the one who's come forward with this or announced that it's a match. And also, very importantly, when there are at Coop's house, and we got to talk about what Allie was doing at that point too. But when they get to Coop's house, they have found the gun in that trunk that keeps popping open. We knew inevitably there was going to be something in that trunk. As a matter of fact, there was a protracted sequence when Allie's driving the car this week, and they go out to the car, and I'm like, someone's got to look in that trunk, man. And it turns out to be Hernandez that looks in that trunk and finds the gun, which I
Mm-hmm.
assume that they've done the ballistics and matched because they arrest them. By the end of the episode, they've arrested him. But what do you think about how Hernandez is suddenly so central to the plot here?
Yeah, that was kind of the comment I was making earlier of it feels very late in the season to be bringing both police characters to the forefront the way that they have, especially because I'm not sure how much I love the woman character, but I mean, I can go with it. I like Hernandez enough. I like seeing more of him. I, I don't mind it. It seems reasonable to develop for this character to be doing these things. Although the trash hunt seemed a bit above and beyond. But what are you thinking?
I'll save my theory on how Hernandez might be tying into the rest of this towards the end of the episode. But I like the fact that the investigate. I just like the fact that in the show, I was concerned, especially early on, where they didn't explain the ring camera footage situation,
Yeah.
that this show would be like just a bunch of idiotic people not noticing that things are disappearing around them and people are, potentially dying or getting beat up, etc. That the show has him reckoning with all of this, right? Like that people are saying this is not normal behavior, something weird is
Yes.
going on, and
Yes.
the police are onto him immediately.
Yes.
Oh, another huge piece of information here, by the way, of course, is they find the nanny cam footage of Coop inside the house. So at that
Yes.
point, they know that Sam's been lying about Coop. They know that Coop's been lying, of course. And of course, that makes him extremely suspicious. Think about the evidence here now that they find his blood and, with the bleach and everything. And now that we know that he's been in the house, maybe not so weird that Coop's blood would be in the house somewhere or his DNA would be in the house. So you could look the other way at that. But there's the whole circumstance. Of course, he's in a relationship with Paul's ex-wife. Sam has said that Paul is trying to get back together with her. And then you, of course, have Coop getting into a fight with Paul at that party. So it makes him look like there is some animosity between the two of them, and maybe they ran into each other at the house. And of course, there is the suspicious aspect of the crime. And I'm going to bring it up again here because I think we have to speculate on what happened, the actual crime scene situation. But we've heard it again that they find Sam's gun in her safe, exactly like she said. It has not been discharged. It's a .22, so it doesn't match the caliber of the gunshot. And most importantly is that Paul discharged a gun as well. That gun is missing. It is not this gun. It's a different gun that he discharged. That gun is nowhere to be found. And of course, there's a suspicious fact that he was shot in the head and then shot twice more. And I was always suspicious of that from the start, that I'm like, is someone trying to make this look like a murder? And I think that's where my theory is going to circle back to.
I can't wait to hear your theory.
I'm probably going to be completely wrong on this one, but we don't know.
I mean, you have a history of figuring out the mystery well ahead of time. So I think your odds are decent, but
I was thinking just today about how that the whole Mayor of Easttown thing. That I have to call out again. That I even called it out on the podcast, that when the reveal came, that everybody's just like, no one saw this coming. And I'm like, not only did I know who it was, I knew the reason why. And I predicted it weeks ago. But I'll just pat myself on the back there one more time.
As you should.
Meanwhile, Elena and her family are getting more and more involved in this. This is a mess, by the way. We find out that in her past, she had some criminal involvement, probably why she's not so averse to getting into it now. But most importantly, of course, that her screw-up brother has now owes this drug dealer $150,000.
Oh my God, what a mess.
And if she can, I mean, I'm at this moment, I'm thinking, not only is her brother a screw-up, putting himself into that kind of debt, obviously, and potentially endangering his life as well. So it's not just the money part of it with this Felix guy, who's a total creep, obviously. But beyond that is that if she somehow shows up with $150,000, he's going to be like, oh, good. How are you getting yourself on the hands on that money? I want to know more about whatever's going on, right? So none of this is good. It's like really like disastrous, basically.
I will say, though, from a production perspective, I liked how much of this dialogue was in Spanish.
Yes.
I thought that was a nice...
There's a lot of Spanish here, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of Spanish in this particular episode, and I thought it was very realistic. So I did appreciate that. But yes, this whole situation is a train wreck.
And worse than that, I mean, potentially worse than that, because she at least is willingly going into this. She is dragging Hector into this too. Hector has been ignoring her calls because he is afraid that maybe what does she call who does George Clooney, maybe here George Clooney has been killing people over in those houses over there. And George Clooney, though, should keep the gray. So John Hamm's still not gray, and Clooney with the dark hair right now on Broadway looks a little creepy now that he's dyed his hair, I gotta say. Have you seen him in the Good Night and Good Luck, or the stills from there?
I actually have seen Good Night and Good Luck.
You did? Oh my God, how was it? What'd you think?
This was actually, I think it was my birthday gift from my husband, although we jointly decided upon it, but it costs a ransom to go see a Broadway show at this
Right.
point. So we needed
Especially
to tie it to some occasion. I enjoyed it. I never saw the movie.
Okay.
So I didn't have anything to compare it to. I did enjoy it. It has a very clear political agenda. So, that might be off-putting to people who aren't prepared for it.
As did the film, by the way, in the film.
I wasn't prepared for it, but I also wasn't upset by it, which, if you know me, that comes to no surprise. But I thought it was good. I thought, it's a very, very small cast. And I thought all of the actors were very strong. I think perhaps George Clooney is actually not the strongest actor in that cast. So yeah, all around, I would recommend it.
If you can get a ticket, that's been breaking insane. These box office
Is that
records.
right?
Oh yeah, like I think last week, like 2 weeks ago, it made $4 million in a week, which was a record, and I think it broke its week record the following week. So it's just
We
insane.
actually saw it in previews before it
Oh,
officially opened,
there you
so it
go.
might have been easier to get a ticket for
Yes,
that
definitely.
reason. Although I treated it like a Taylor Swift concert, like the second I knew the tickets were going on sale, I was on telecharge buying them. But it definitely, because it was a preview, there were a little bit of there were some rough edges, but it was fine. It didn't bother me.
Are you guys planning on another massive ticket on Broadway right now? Watching Jake Gyllenhaal and Denzel Washington in Othello.
So not going to Othello because I would love to, but we've already seen Denzel Washington do
Yes.
Shakespeare and
Hmm.
Julius Caesar on
Yeah.
Broadway, which was great. It was a
That's
very
why I was curious.
interesting
I know you've seen
interpretation
him.
of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think at the end of this month, though, we have tickets for Glengarry Glen Ross, which
Oh,
is my
interesting.
husband's birthday gift. Because again, we had to justify that cost somehow.
Who's in that cast?
Kieran Culkin
Oh wow.
and somebody else very famous that I cannot remember, but I'm going to look it up right now. Let's see. Bob Odenkirk.
Oh wow. Wow.
Yes.
I know you guys are Mammoth fans in general, because you've seen what was the other one, guys? So Buffalo.
Yes. I want to say Buffalo Soldier. That's not it.
That's not it.
Great song though. I'm,
Yes.
I'm I'm Googling that now. American Buffalo.
American Buffalo, yeah.
That's why I was trying to put a word after buffalo, but the
Yeah, it's
adjective is
before,
before.
exactly.
Yeah. American Buffalo, which was terrific.
Yeah, the but Glengarry, great play
Again,
also.
I've never seen the movie, so I will be going into it completely fresh. I mean, I have some idea what it's about, as I did
Always
with,
be closing, always be
yeah.
closing.
And I had some idea for Good Night and Good Luck, but I kind of like going in blind.
Yeah, wow. Look at that, the little theater digression here on the podcast.
I mean, it's one of those things that when you live in New York City, you think, we really don't take advantage of all the culture here and blah, blah, blah. So then, you feel like, okay, I've done my part.
It's so insanely expensive, though. It's so expensive.
Everything has gotten completely out of control.
I mean, I'm not really for musicals, but I do like a play. I mean, especially if it's an interpretation of something that I've seen before. But these costs, I mean, I can't imagine spending hundreds of dollars on a ticket. It's too much.
There are ways to get them
Yeah.
much cheaper. There are different lotteries, and you can stand online at the TKTS booth. And even I've heard people have good luck just showing up the box office the day of, and you
Yeah.
can snag tickets for an amazing price. The problem is, as you know, when you work full time and you have a child, you
Right.
need to do some advanced planning. You
Right.
can't really drop everything like that, or at least two of you can't. One of you might be able to. So to the extent that you want to make it a night out for you and your spouse, you kind of are stuck.
I know. I know. So really, I've been trying to remember where we were in the conversation. So really, all the way back to
John
Hector.
Hamm and gray hair, and
That's right.
yeah, George
Hector calls
Clooney.
him George
Yes,
Clooney,
yes,
and but Hector is saying like, "Whoa, I'm getting really good business right now because everybody's so
yeah.
paranoid about what's happening over there," and so that's good for him in a way, right? It's a boon for his business. Apparently, these people, rich as they were, I guess, because the crime rate was so low, they weren't that concerned with their security systems. Which, by the way, I understand. I think that does end up happening. Oftentimes, you just assume everything's going to be okay because you don't have crime
Sure.
in your area. But it also seems like there seems to be like, ooh, look, more opportunities to give me those codes. But this is once again a terrible idea because if this Felix guy starts to get greedy and finds out how they're breaking into these homes and starts pressuring Hector, Hector knows that this is a slippery slope they're on here, right? And of course, it's going to come back and point at him. If people are breaking into these houses without setting off the alarm, who put in the alarm last week, right? Like this is, I think he's very right to be very concerned.
Oh, absolutely.
So I feel I got to tell you, like of all the people here who are making terrible decisions and getting themselves in trouble, and I do care about most of these characters, but Hector, I feel really bad for. Like I feel like
Yeah,
he is
so
just
innocent.
caught
Yeah.
in the crossfire here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Although he did give that original code, but yeah.
he did that, but that's it, right?
So
It's like
he's
that.
not perfect, but
Yes,
yes,
it's a
more or less. In
right,
comparison to everybody else, he
exactly.
seems to have the greatest conscience and moral center.
All right, let's talk about Sam and Mel a little bit. So Mel, now back from her Princeton trip, is wants to be there for Sam, who's like a very close friend of hers, and we see multiple times here where they're alone together, and it's very nerve wracking because you're afraid that Mel's going to confess something like, "Oh, we were away, we were like in a time capsule," and Sam looks really suspicious, looking at her like, what happened while you guys were
Mm-hmm.
traveling? So do you think this is like a powder keg that's going to go off, or what's going on here between the two of them?
Yeah, it felt like they were kind of circling around each other
Yeah.
a little bit in this episode. And I think one way or the other, somebody's digressions, if not both of them, are going to come out. Although for Sam, she hasn't done anything wrong except, they are friends, Mel and Sam. So it might be like a violation of the girl code.
That's definitely, but I mean, I guess neither one of them. Mel does not know about Sam's involvement with her ex, and there might be some jealousy there too,
Oh, absolutely.
considering we obviously
And
know that she still has feelings for him.
yes, and for Mel, it is another incidence of her cheating, also, right? I don't
Right,
think she has an open relationship with Nick, from what I can gather.
right.
So, I mean, in that way, Mel has more to lose than Sam, I think.
That was actually one of the most suspenseful moments in this whole episode for me was when I was like, oh my God, she's going to confide in her. But then I'm like, she can't, because now she's going to be like, hey, you know what? Like, now I'm cheating on, Nick
Yeah,
with,
I'm the
with my,
Paul again,
I
right?
did it again.
Because, yeah,
Exactly.
Sam
So,
was the one that originally made the point, you're the Paul. And so, like,
yeah.
yeah,
Especially, I mean, it
now it's
really,
a pattern of behavior.
exactly. And by the way, I think this is what I like about the writing on the show, and which there's certain things that I think are not well formed, but a lot of the character motivations are pretty well defined. And that's an example of it there, right? Like where we see it's her dissatisfaction in her marriage that she then goes and sleeps with Nick. And, she basically says this to her husband, or to Coop previously. And then it's like she's feeling this pressure from Nick that they have to, maybe she even wants to propose to her. He wants to make this serious. And then she was like, I just got out of a marriage, and now all of a sudden I'm feeling trapped again. I'm going to run back into the arms of the person I cheated on in the first place. So it's like, I think it's very telling of her psychology. This isn't accidental. This is her again running away from whatever discomfort she has. And I don't think she's gotten to the bottom of it yet.
Yeah, especially because this is the type of thing that really close girlfriends would confide in
Sure.
each
Mm-hmm.
other.
Yeah.
So the fact that she's holding it back is indicative of something. Yeah.
And maybe in a way, tying in thematically to all of this is what is happening. And I, once again, think that this is well done, paralleling some of these character motivations with what's happening with Allie, right? Allie had this relationship that
Mm,
didn't work out. She still pines for it, but I mean, it's
what a
very,
jerk this guy is.
I know, it very much is a potential, or I should say, a fact that Coop may have similar emotional problems as his sister, maybe just not as pronounced. But you see that Allie, who basically has been called a stalker, it has literally a restraining order against this guy. This guy runs into her at the gym, and then I always thought he was kind of a jerk, to be honest, because for him to have a restraining order against this woman and then still, get into close proximity with her again. But all of this is, just goes disastrously, although she's enjoying it at first, where they're kind of rekindling this childhood, this teenhood romance that they had. She's wearing his football jersey, like basically they're like
Hmm.
recreating their high school sexual dalliances in real time. Very funny when they're having that hookup in the car, and the guy's hiding in the Hernandez is hiding behind
Yes.
the garbage can. He's like, "Oh, great." I have to sit here for like as long as that's going to take. Maybe it'll be quick. Who knows? but he's got like trapped there until they're done. And then, of course, they are hooking up. Obviously, he's cheating on his wife. And so that's a whole other level of complexity, which, of course, again, parallels all these other themes here in the show as well. These characters who have these unsatisfied lives. And then the cops show up and he's like, oh, I'm just a friend, and skips out. And you see Allie right away bristling against this behavior, which I assume this is a pattern with him. And she's feeling that behavior again. But then at the end of the episode, when she's at the end of her rope, she is texting him in the middle of the night, asking him to come over.
I mean, listen, even as acquaintances, I think it's a crappy thing to do to
Right.
leave somebody when the police are raiding their house.
Right.
Like that obviously is a very traumatic experience for anyone. So, I mean, you would at least say, do you want me to stay? This
Right.
is crazy, instead of just shoving your way out the door past the police officers.
Exactly.
It tells you a lot about
Right.
his character generally, not just his relationship with her, but his character generally, because who would abandon someone like that in that situation?
Right. He's just trying to protect himself and he's not thinking about her at all.
I mean, it reminds me of this phrase. I mean, clearly she has a diagnosed mental illness. So I'm not saying this applies to her, but it reminds me of this phrase: behind every crazy woman is a man who made her that way. Like, if he treated her like this, I can see how she was brought to the edge.
I mean, and exactly that. And the fact that he is conveniently, I mean, if you dig into it, he really comes off as such an incredible jerk, because if he wants to go and cheat, he has other options. I'm sure
Right.
he can just meet somebody else at the club or something like that at the gym, and then or at the or at the club where she's performing. But the other thing that's strange, but the more disturbing aspect of it is when you play out that logic, as in, oh, I'll hook up with her, and then if she does say something, I'll be like, oh, that crazy lady, like it's so there's a very dark,
it's like exploiting
exactly, right.
her ongoing feelings for him,
Right,
and exploiting the whole situation generally.
and in that way, she doesn't. What'd you say?
It's sick.
Oh, it is sick. It is. And in that way, that particular aspect of her does not really mirror anybody else on the show, right? It's this her fixation with him, and maybe that fixation maybe a big part of it is that there was a traditional life that she could have had, and that's the appeal there more than anything else. And in some ways, even if she's just subverting it, at least she somehow still is connected to it in some way, which I guess in that way does thematically tie into these other things, because you do have these people who are unhappy in their privileged lives, and maybe also presenting something that's not true, and she's just playing into it herself. And of course, there's an irony there too, that this guy looks at her and says, oh, you get to be so free and you get to do what you want to do and play music. But of course, she's like probably, really can't survive without the assistance of her brother. So all of these people are seeing each other in some kind of rose-colored perspective, and probably wrong about what's actually going on. Okay, so this all culminates. Allie calls up Coop. I'm not sure why she didn't text him right away, but at Paul's funeral. I'm going to talk about Paul's funeral here a little bit. The whole crazy situation that the mom doesn't even know that they're going through a divorce.
Bananas.
That this girl is there, and she's like, who are you exactly? And Sam even says that when she's talking to Mel, right? I don't know if this is something he just never told her, or if she's demented. The mom does not seem to have dementia, so I think he just probably never mentioned it to her at all.
Although I will say moms can be in denial about bad news.
True.
So it's possible he mentioned it, she didn't accept it, and they never revisited it.
Yeah, he thinks like, oh, they're just sitting,
they'll work it out.
They're apart for a few months, but it's just going to work out, right? And not realizing that there's actual divorce proceedings ongoing. And then, of course, conveniently at the funeral, Kat Resnick is there, who, of course, this finally pays off something that we saw earlier, where she was hooking up with her daughter's boyfriend. And he blackmails her, Coop blackmails her into being his lawyer because he knows what she's been doing. And then Coop gets arrested in front of everybody. And of course, everybody who's been thinking like something's off with him, they're all looking at him now askance, wondering what's going on. What do you think about his arrest? Where do you think this puts him as a character? There's a few things actually, one that I maybe we to mention before I get your final thoughts. But the idea that, first of all, there's a whole conversation about if Paul, because he got murdered in his house, and he is kind of grossed out by this conversation. These guys just having this open conversation about how who wants to live in a murder house? Oh, I'd move in there if they give me a big enough discount on the house. And there's that, and of course there is just the legality. This goes back to Mel's conversation with Sam. Can you help me with all this paperwork? Do you have any insight into that at all, from with your legal perspective, about the having to get his death certificate so that she can get the insurance policy, and what was some of the complexities there of that? Do you have any insight?
Well, I have no insight from a legal experience level because I don't do any type of trust and estates work, and I never have. But as a person who has had people pass away, I do think it can be an enormous amount of paperwork when someone passes, depending on how they have set things up, especially, which, wealthy people usually would have an estate planner to make it so that there is a more seamless transition of their assets. But the fact that he was getting divorced might complicate things. I don't know if he was, sometimes people leave things as they are. They can't be bothered to change them. And sometimes they're really on top of it because there's so much bitterness in the relationship dissolving that they want to make sure this person doesn't indirectly benefit from an untimely passing.
Right.
So hard to say. And my personal experience is that the funeral director really does walk you through a lot of the paperwork relating to death certificates and how many you need and who they need to go to, and submitting whatever needs to be submitted to Social Security and all of that stuff. But I do understand how it could be overwhelming. I did like Sam's pile of, other people's crap, of, trying to farm out all the paperwork to the extent she could.
The murder investigation itself, and maybe you don't have insight into this either, other than just from watching TV shows like me, but the murder investigation itself may complicate the release of the money as well, right? Although Sam doesn't seem to be struggling for money in general right now, anyway.
Yeah, I definitely have no experience with that, but I guess it could if you were considered a suspect.
Yeah.
I don't know if they would hold up the distribution or just try and claw it back if you are eventually convicted of murder.
Right. And do you know anything as to whether, here's my one theory I have, which I've mentioned before, that this could be a suicide that's being covered up as a murder. Do you know if there are any situations in which a suicide wouldn't by chance pay out a life insurance policy?
So my understanding, and thankfully I have no experience with this practically or work-wise, is that life insurance policies tend to have a clause that if there is a suicide within a certain amount of time after getting the policy, it won't pay out. So maybe, for the first 2 years after you get the policy, if there's a suicide, it's not going to pay out. Okay. Because, obviously they don't want people getting the insurance and then
just so they
taking their own lives.
Right.
Yeah.
If they have a financial problem. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think generally, if it's a longstanding policy, my understanding is that suicide will not stop the policy from paying out.
Interesting. I hadn't thought about that, because here's my theory. So we can start speculating on some of this. But let's wrap up the episode before I start my speculation. But we do see Coop has now been arrested. Resnick comes in and almost gets him off and saying like, hey, she doesn't own the house. She doesn't actually couldn't have actually allowed you into the house. She has a history of mental problems. This is Allie they're talking about. So you shouldn't have been there. The investigation is completely fraudulent. And, but they're like, but you know what we found in his trunk? We found the murder weapon. I assume the ballistics by the way. I wonder hopefully they waited for the ballistics. So that would be a really weird, reversal at the beginning of next week's episode saying like, oh, well, the caliber matched, but actually not the bullets. So, you're off the hook on that.
I
But
mean,
that,
I have no practical experience in that area either. This whole conversation is a list of things that I don't know much about, but I do think it might be enough for probable cause in order to arrest them. But then I also think if the investigation, if the warrant was improperly executed, that would be the fruit of the improper warrant. So it would still be out.
and maybe that is a loophole that gets him out of jail. But at the moment, he's actually sleeps like a baby. Oh, speaking of sleeping like a baby, I completely forgot to mention this. How disorienting was the beginning of this episode?
Oh, the dream sequence.
Yeah. At first, I'm like, okay, so he's stealing this jewelry, these diamonds, which is true. Everything he says, by the way, about diamonds. Diamonds are like so
Oh, the
not
De Beers
rare at all.
racket. Yeah, absolutely.
There was like a Freakonomics podcast I listened to about the diamonds not being rare, and they're saying the most common items in a house are children. The second most common items in the house are diamonds. The third most common item in the house is a television. So diamonds are less rare than TVs, but they are valuable only because of this
De Beers,
De
yeah,
Beers
their
has like
whole
basically,
racket.
yeah, exactly. It is a
Manufactured scarcity.
exactly. So it is very funny. But so all that observations are true. And I'm like, whose house are we in? Why is he stealing from someone's house when he's just been in this situation? And of course, it all turns out no, he's in his own house. He's stealing from his own wife. But they're making breakfast downstairs, and then the art guy is there. Lou is there again. There we go. The only appearance of Lou in this entire episode. And who else is there? The girl he hooked up with, whose name I can't remember. Liv from The Office is there as well.
I think, we talk about how the seams show a little bit on this show. It might be, don't forget about these two characters because we're going to bring them back.
Maybe they had to pay them.
Yeah,
anyway.
Usually you see it by the previously on,
Yeah,
but maybe they were just kind of like, just a heads up, don't forget these two.
But that just goes to speak to the fact that he is not sleeping well. But now he gets to sleep well because getting caught in a way is like eased his mind that he can maybe just do his penance in prison. And that's a pretty funny referendum on where he's at, where he would rather be in prison than deal with the consequences of his actions at this point.
I mean, I guess it's a good excuse for a lot of stuff. I can't help you. I'm in prison.
Sorry, I can't help you.
I couldn't be out there making money. I'm in prison.
You guys have to fend for yourselves now.
Yeah, built-in excuse.
But I'm pretty sure he'll be out of prison soon enough. So let's talk about possible theories here. All right. So theory number one, I do think that this is a suicide that's being covered up.
What if it's Mitzi? I'm sorry, that just occurred to me.
Mitzi. Oh, yeah. You know what?
Misty.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I don't remember. Yeah. If we actually, which name, but she is hers. I did consider that because yes. So I have so many
I'm sorry.
theories.
I got excited and I jumped in. Please finish. What if it's a suicide?
No, that's a good theory too. I've thought about that when she was at the funeral and they were talking about how she is trying to like make a move on her next guy. She definitely is on my suspect list. So suspect list number one, she has a boyfriend or something. She knows she's going to be cut out of this situation. Maybe he was breaking up with her. Who knows what was going on, and she needed a way out. But we'd have to assume that that she would know that she's getting cut out of the will or something, and then for him to be killed at the house, at Sam's house, or his old house, actually seems like a weird place to do that. But she definitely is on the suspect list. It just doesn't seem that the show is giving us clues in that direction. On the other hand, I think it's more interesting that multiple times over the course of the show, they have indicated that there were two guns. He fired a gun, but no one's saying like, oh, we found bullets in the walls or something like that. So I'm like, so he shot a gun. Who did he shoot it at? Why did the gun disappear? And I'm like, okay, he shot himself. And that's why I was curious about the insurance claim on a suicide, because we don't know how old this policy is. Maybe he just got it 8 months ago or something, right?
Right.
So maybe he is doing this as in a spiteful way to not give her money. Maybe he's in financial straits. Maybe she's going to inherit a lot of debt because they're not divorced yet. So maybe we don't know what his actual finances are. He may be, his restaurants may not be doing well at this moment. So he needed that insurance policy, and he's screwing her over because he's at the end of his rope, and he is committing suicide basically where she will find him as a way, like as a screw you to her potentially. And now she needs to cover it up with a murder to make it look like a murder. And that's where there were the additional shootings, which they thought were suspicious even back in the day. And then, of course, the additional thing with the bleach and the blood cover up. But we know what that is. That's
right.
That comes from Coop trying to cover his presence up. So then the question becomes, who is making this look like a murder and who planted the gun in Coop's car? So one possibility is that, and this seems unlikely to me, but she's my prime suspect, is that Sam did this, didn't kill her husband, but covered up to make it look like a murder. Maybe she planted the gun in the trunk of the car, Coop's car, because she's been jealous and been angry at him recently. So this would be a way, although it seems very vindictive if that's what she did, but possibly that is still definitely possibly the case. But go ahead. What were you going to say?
I mean, the thing is, we've seen everybody in that car, right?
Yes.
So it could be any of those people that we've seen in the car. To go back to my excitement over Mitzi/Misty, whoever she may be, I think she's one of the few people we have not seen in that car. So
Right.
Maybe how she would need to have a co-conspirator to get that gun into Coop's trunk, most likely, unless it was just a random choice of a car with a trunk to throw a gun into, which would seem a bizarre coincidence. So let's move Misty/Mitzi down the list, I guess.
Right. Yeah, and definitely not like I cut this out of our conversation last week, by the way, because as I was having the conversation during the edit, it just didn't make any sense to me. But I was like saying, why would, like, let's say it was the art dealers that were framing him for the murder. And then I'm like, why would they have been at that house? And what were they following him around? But then, and then, of course, the most glaring thing about it is if you're kicking his butt in the street and you just happen to be there, but you've also committed a murder within the past week, that's drawing way too much attention to yourself, right?
In a small town, yeah.
Yeah, you might want to kick his butt in a different location a month later when he is alone, but in the middle of town, and you may potentially, they might find some kind of physical evidence in your car if they happen to pull you over. With that ties you to the murder. So anyway, all that is to say that it is probably someone who's much more intimately connected to Paul.
Okay, but going back, I get that, but going back to Sam. So this all happened the same day she went to Boston. So are we saying that he committed suicide, she decided to cover it up and make it look like a murder, and then drove to Boston? And at what point?
She was planning to go to Boston, actually. She tells him, remember when they hook up, she says, we're going to go to Boston.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying, that's a busy day. She didn't seem, she was shaken up when she got to Boston. She didn't seem covering up a suicide shaken up level.
Yes, I completely agree. I actually, that's the thing that I was going to circle back to, that the idea that, and of course, Coop stumbles, it's not even like she comes home and then would frame Coop or create this crime scene. Coop is there when she's presently in Boston. So when she goes home, she cries to her mom and all that happens. She's definitely emotional, but it doesn't seem to be she's so emotional because she just saw her dead ex-husband at the bottom of the stairs and was shuffling the kid out while past the body. It seems that couldn't have happened, right? I don't think that's the case, that it was that premeditated on her part. But here's the more intriguing aspect of this. What's the last thing we see in the episode? We see Hernandez calling her on the phone, Sam.
Mm-hmm.
So Hernandez has been dating someone and seems to be disturbed by this relationship. Oh, I was supposed to go on this date last night. I really didn't. Something else was going on. So what if Hernandez has been hooking up with her and he is helping cover up a crime? Maybe he thinks that she might be a suspect and he's trying to protect her. And he is framing Coop because Coop, he knows now that Coop is his sexual competitor.
Interesting. I mean, we've not been given any indication that Sam has any other man in her life, have we?
Well, I mean, we don't actually have an indication of that. That's actually true. She does try to call it off. So she hasn't been spending as much time with Coop recently. So that
True.
could be part of it. But I could imagine that this is me reading between the lines because we had so much time on Hernandez and his dating career in this particular episode. So right away, I'm like, why are we so focused on this? And then, of course, he's calling her at the end of the episode. Now, you could say, oh, he's calling her because he has further questions for her. Like he's just part of his
That was how I took it.
But I'm a little suspicious and I'm thinking, I think that that's my theory. My theory is, did Paul kill himself? And then there's a version of this where Sam is in on this cover up, but she seems to have been, she's hooked up with Coop since then. It doesn't seem like she is that nefarious. Like, think about how conniving she would have to be to have intentionally framed Coop for the murder. And then all this happens. So then I'm thinking, what if this cop has tried to, or was starting some kind of relationship with Sam? They dated at some point. Sam's not into him. He finds out that Coop is his competition, then finds Paul's body and makes it look like a murder. Maybe not to frame Paul, but to frame Coop, but only to keep her from getting screwed over on the possible, policy, the insurance policy, or whatever financial consequences would come after that. And then all of that. And then, of course, who is the person who finds the gun, quote unquote, finds the gun in the trunk? It's Hernandez. So imagine he is trying to plant the gun somewhere. And he's like, well, here's a perfect place for me to plant it. And I could say, oh, the trunk was open and it was like, line of sight. I didn't need a warrant to see it. Although, like you said, there's the whole fruit of the poisonous tree situation. But you could say, hey, I could see it. The trunk was open. So there's a way where he could plant the gun. And of course, if has these animosity towards Coop, then that would be a way to kill two birds in one stone, right? Like potentially Sam gets the money, Coop's put away, and now he has an opportunity. So anyway, that's my theory. Like I said, this is a lot of speculation.
It's a little protracted.
A lot of speculation on this.
So, okay, remind me again, how do we know that Paul shot a gun that was not the gun that they eventually that is not the gun that he was shot with himself?
Oh, so
first, gunpowder residue on his hands?
Yes, there's gunpowder residue on his hands. And that's a very good point.
Okay, but how do we know it's not the same gun he was shot with? That's what I can't remember.
Right, because I don't actually know that piece of information. So
but they said that, didn't they? That it was a different gun?
That's how I know it. Exactly what you just said. But you make a really good point that I don't understand what their logic is, but I do. But that's basically how I know. First, there was gunshot residue on his hand, and then in this episode, they said there's Paul, there's another gun, and we haven't found that gun. But how they know it's a second gun, I don't know.
That had to have been explained, but neither of us can recall it somehow.
Right.
Okay, so why? I'm going back further in this process.
Sure.
Why did Paul have a gun and shoot it?
Right. We don't know. We just know that Paul did have guns. So that's another question is, there is a possibility. There could be a theory that, they said he might have been mobbed up and that might have been the actual root cause of this. Although then there's all the suspiciousness of like the gun disappearing, et cetera, and so forth. So a lot of that doesn't really make sense. But we do know that he was for some reason paranoid about a gun. He had a gun that he used to carry around with him and shoot regularly. And he had even bought a gun for Sam to protect herself. So then you could ask yourself, some people are just into guns, but you could ask yourself, why was he buying a gun for Sam? And of course, that's where Sam says, you can check my safe. My
Right.
gun is
Never
in
been
there and it's
fired.
never been fired. And they did verify that the gun had never been
Okay.
fired.
So maybe Paul was someplace earlier in the evening
Yeah.
where he did shoot the gun, or earlier in the day
Oh, good
that he
point. He was
did
a target
shoot the
practice
gun.
or something. Yeah. Because
At,
he does like to shoot.
or something nefarious.
Right.
And that person found him back at this house. Why or how, I don't know. Well, following him is how, but why, I don't know.
And that person is Hernandez.
Let's bring it full circle.
And he followed him back, killed him in the house.
But also, getting back to the trunk thing. I mean, I don't think someone waited till a moment that Coop's trunk flew open and threw the gun in, right? Like
Right.
it was a purposeful
Sure.
framing
They planted
of
it. Yeah.
Coop, right? So who would also have the motivation to do that?
Well, that's why I think it was Hernandez, right? Because I think that it could be at that very moment when Hernandez looks into the trunk and he's like, and then of course we cut to him call the other detective and says, "You have to see this." It could just be him seeing the opportunity to plant the gun in Coop's house. Again, this is why I make Hernandez my prime suspect. Not necessarily in the murder. I don't think he killed Paul. I don't actually believe that. I'm still leaning on the Paul committed suicide situation. I think it's still my theory, and that this is all a cover up. So, because it's just that all this talk about the insurance policy is I think tying into my theory here. Because if she's just going to inherit the house, it actually doesn't matter how he died. She's just going to inherit the house. But maybe he had more debt than he had, assets, and they need the insurance policy, right?
Mafia stuff can end in murder. So.
True. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's still a valid theory. The reason I don't think it holds up is because everybody is, passing that around as a popular theory, which makes me think like, no, that's not it. If everybody's saying it, then it can't be this. Yeah. Once again, this is not like
that's fair.
Real logic. This is like TV logic.
No, it's story construction logic. Right. Yeah.
Exactly.
No, I agree with that. I don't know, but I hope whatever the answer is one, revealed this season.
Yes.
And
I'm pretty sure it will be revealed this season.
I hope it is something that is very clean. Do you know what I mean? I hope it's like a non-protracted, non-unbelievable explanation of how things happened. What if it's one of these kids that we just see around in the periphery?
She's hooking up with one of the high school kids who did something stupid.
I'm not convinced it's a crime of passion.
It could be Kat Resnick's daughter's boyfriend, who's also hooking up with Sam.
Maybe.
One more thing I forgot to bring up earlier was the whole moment when Hernandez supposedly, if my theory holds up, and this is not moot, but it's an interesting coincidence. And it's very important. I knew this as soon as I saw it in the show, that this is kind of the direction the show is going to be, and that this whole murder investigation is probably going to disappear. Because, very importantly, Detective Lynn is in the basement and is headed over to the stash of stolen stuff. And at that moment is interrupted and, of course, doesn't even think of searching any further because they've literally caught the smoking gun in his trunk. But it's very important, I think, that she's about to make the discovery that of all the stolen stuff, which of course would crack this whole thing wide open. And, he could not continue to steal things, and he'll be revealed as the neighborhood thief in that moment. But nope, his secret is safe because, of course, we already know that the gun is going to be a red herring, which goes back to that. Are you worried about this not resolving this season? I'm pretty sure they are going to resolve this season so that he can go back to stealing and blackmailing next season.
Fair.
And maybe, this is the first blackmailing, this Kat Resnick situation. So maybe there'll be even more of that next season. But it is funny that the show, in a lot of ways, with this interpersonal stuff, which I've enjoyed, is maybe has delayed the inevitable, main plot, which is him stealing and blackmailing,
right?
And using his whisper network of maids to control this neighborhood. I mean, once you start blackmailing a lot of people, if they start talking to each other, I guess you're going to reveal yourself. So well, I guess that's the problem for season 2 potentially.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that you are doing has to be problematic enough that you aren't going to share it with anybody else, you know?
Yeah, I guess we can save our speculation for where the season's going to wrap up for next week or the week after. But I'm very curious. I still do not know where the show is going to land, and I mean that in a good way. Like, I'm not sure how they would wrap things up.
Well, I have concerns that it's going to be not satisfactory because there is not enough time left.
I think there's a lot of different parts of the plot here that have not fully been developed and how they're all going to tie together. And of course, we have the whole, we're very close to the end of the season, and we haven't even resolved the whole way that he's trying to get his money for his investments back at the his own fund back, and how he still has Liv kind of working behind the scenes. So all of that's been kind of dropped. So there are a lot of dangling threads here in the plot that haven't come together. But maybe, some of those things I'm sure are going to roll over into next season.
Right.
By the way, did you have you have any curiosity in watching this show Duster on HBO?
I haven't even heard of it.
It's from J.J. Abrams. It is the guy who plays Sawyer, Holloway. I forget his first name.
So funny. You gave me no context except Sawyer, which is a television show from like 20 years ago. And I still know.
And you knew. And he hasn't really had a star-making turn since then. And he's a driver for the mob out in the desert in the early 70s. He's been recruited by like the first Black female FBI agent to work this investigation. He's a driver for this mob boss. And he's actually been coerced into this, but he's trying to prove that the mob boss did not commit this crime. And that's why, he still thinks he's an honorable guy. But of course, there's going to be some conspiracy over the course of the season. The reviews have been pretty good. They had the first episode yesterday. And we are still looking for that next show we'll be covering week to week. But there are intermittent things that we'll be covering here, and we'll announce them as we go along. And continuing to cover or beginning coverage of Murderbot and Duster, probably talking about Duster here on the podcast as well. Also wrapping up Mobland, which has been a very silly show, I have to tell you.
In a good way?
I mean, I don't know if it's supposed to be this silly, but it's been very silly. But it is very popular, very popular. So I guess we will get back to it for the finale. Sona, do you have any relationship with Mission Impossible films by chance?
I saw the first one decades ago.
Yes.
Yeah, but I haven't seen any of them since then.
They have probably the last one that Tom Cruise will be in. It is so funny. We were watching the first one yesterday, my daughter and I together. She said, "Why does he look so young?" And I'm like, "Oh, well, this movie's like 30 years old. That's why he looks so young."
That's why.
And I'm like, he's 62 now. So I'm like, he was like 32 years old, maybe a little bit younger when he was making this movie. And she said, he looks like he's 15. He does look very young. That's 30 years. I mean, that's 30 years old. He looks like a baby. But then again, everybody looks like a baby to me nowadays. So
that's right.
All right. And we have the final one of those films, probably something we'll be covering here on the podcast at some point, a review somewhere in here. All right, Sona, thanks again. I can't wait to see how this thing all wraps up. I'll talk to you soon. And thank you for the conversation.
Thank you. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Have a great day.
You too.
Go Knicks.
That's right. Go New York, go New York, go.
That's right.
Take care.